Hello and welcome to the Fin24 Savings Issue. We're chatting to Priya Naika and she is an advice manager at Old Mutual Personal Finance. Hi Priya.
Hi Mushfiqah, thank you for having me.
Priya, from the Old Mutual Savings and Investment Monitor of 2017, it does seem to be a concern that in 2017, up to 56% of people in metropolitan areas are not saving for education. How does that impact society and how does that impact people's finances?
Yes, I think it's a terrifying stat. More importantly, we're seeing that between 2012 and 2017, there's been a significant dip, especially in the middle to lower income market. And what that means is that in the past, where parents had prioritized education savings as quite an important goal to set their children up for success, it's now being deprioritized because of other stresses and pressures and the retail environment. That creates some concern for the future. If we just do an environmental scan, we know that from the fees must fall movement and education inflation, people are really at risk if they send generations of children out into the market that are simply not prepared for the funding required to study further. And of course that has greater social impact. You know, it may impact your earning ability in the future. It also, funny enough, impacts the parents, you know, if you look at that loop.
Yes.
Because a lot of parents still rely on their children to some extent to supporting them or adding some support in their later years. If these kids are not prepared for furthering their education, that loop also starts to open up later on because they're not in a position to help.
So I don't think that when parents are cutting back on education saving early in their children's lives, they're actually taking all of this into account.
I agree. I think it's a largely a factor of the pressure that most of us are under financially.
The immediate pressure to get some cash flow.
Absolutely, the immediate pressure, and that's very understandable in the current environment. But what we can't ignore is that research has shown that a lot of people still increase or maintain their discretionary spend. So if you look at the stores, if you look at the retailers, people still spend money there. And it becomes a factor of us not allocating the priority or assigning the priority to those longer term goals that we used to in the past, because we're trying to maintain a standard that perhaps we shouldn't have gotten to in the first place. So it really talks to us going back to the basics of budgeting, releasing money in our cash flow, being very close to the decision-making process, because very often we swipe a card, we spend money without thinking of the impact it has on our budget, or even having a budget to that, that point.
So it really just goes right back to the basic framework of having a budget, knowing what your wants are, knowing what your needs are, being honest about it, and then looking at the scenario and saying, is cutting back on something like education savings really the thing for me to do? Should I not rather close down one of my store cards and take that installment and put it towards that? I think simple things like that.
I think you've articulated it perfectly. It's about having a closer relationship with our money, making conscious decisions about our money. And the budgeting process, often we think budgeting is a very a sad process, or it's something around cutting back.
And therefore we avoid it.
And therefore we avoid it. You know, it's this deprivation. But it's really a process that allows you to connect with your money and make decisions about what's important to you and what you will not sacrifice on because it's a non-negotiable. Be that education or even, taking a holiday or accounting for emergency funds, but it's making the provision and taking the action associated with that.
And I think that then also speaks to the fact that the Savings Monitor indicates that this is taking place more often than not in the lower income households.
Yes, that is a large concern. That's the biggest area of concern for me, because as I say, the environment that we're in, we are looking at people that are being ill prepared for the funding that's required in the future. And the lower income households are absolutely going to be most affected by this. So it's a huge concern, and I think it's something that we really need to talk about more and start placing the emphasis back on this. If we look at education inflation, one must be very careful to distinguish that it is not the same as CPI.
Yes.
Education costs increase at a far higher pace, and so we need to be prepared earlier and in a more disciplined way.
Yeah. The Savings and Investment Monitor also looked at how and where people are borrowing money from. The three primary sources remain from financial institutions, family and friends, and micro lenders. What should be important in this? What should we take from this? How should South Africans look at this? Should they be tackling debt first? Should they be saving? We are borrowing money, we're trying to save money, we're paying back money. It seems to be a vicious circle, and sometimes you seem to feel like a hamster on a wheel.
Yes. So if we look at the Savings and Investment Monitor in the broader context that it provides, the reasons are very important. So people are often taking out additional debt through microlenders and financial institutions and even informal sector, but largely to pay monthly expenses or for emergencies that come up, and that's very short term in nature and very concerning. My thinking around that, and I think, you know, you asked the question, what is more important, saving or paying off debt? If your expenses are exceeding your monthly income, the absolute priority is to start cutting back and making sure that you at least don't exceed your income. And then you start looking at your debt itself and reducing from the most expensive debt, and that's the highest interest rate debt. So really paying off.
But that's a good point that you make. It's not necessarily, your most expensive debt is not necessarily your highest installment.
Yes.
People very often confuse expensive debt with, if I look at an installment of 500 Rand to an installment of 800 Rand, my 800 Rand is my most expensive debt. People do not take into account that it is the interest rate on your debt which determines the expense of the debt.
Yes, it's a good point. If you look at your home loan, it's likely not to be the most expensive debt, but it's probably the highest repayment that you have. But those short-term loans, the personal loans, the one from micro-lenders, usually carry a hefty interest rate, and that is really expensive. When you look at income or debt repayments as a sacrifice from your income, you're really saying, I'm willing to sacrifice this piece of income because I need something and I'd like to fund it through debt. So it becomes really important to know that something you're sacrificing a piece of income for is an important or prioritized expense or item. And to understand that where there's a high interest rate associated, the priority should be on bringing that down, bringing that debt down. You will win in both ways, in that you free up cash flow that you can allocate elsewhere, and of course you're not paying high interest rates in the future and funding debt.
There's no doubt that South Africans are feeling the pinch, but there are also indicators that show that they are also cutting down. South Africans are cutting down, and we are cutting back on luxuries, and we are cutting back on essentials. What do you see? Are there any trends developing? What are people most prepared to cut back on in the luxuries and the essential department?
So I think an encouraging trend is that people are cutting back in the first place, and they're cutting back on a range of different categories. But what we are seeing is that when this journey of cutting back starts, it's normally on the luxury items and things like travel and entertainment, eating out, which is often very expensive. Then we move down into things like alcohol and cigarettes and entertaining friends as well. So those are the big things and the big items. But as we move further down that list, we also see people cutting down on electricity bills and water and consumption expenses.
So there is the concerted effort to save.
There absolutely is a concerted effort to save, but I think we mustn't discount the fact that there's economic pressure on us to save. What is important for us to do is to start saving in the absence of economic pressure, and not only to do it as a reaction to the external environment.
To become proactive about saving.
Correct, because often when we are responding to the environment, it's almost too late. We're in a position where we simply have no other choice. So it becomes a part of our culture or our habit if we embed this despite the external environment.
How important is it for South Africans to be financially educated, to be financially aware, not only of the immediate surrounding, but of the global surrounding and of the economy on the whole? And when I say economy, I'm talking about the global economy, national economy, but also their household economy. How important is it for South Africans to be financially aware and to be financially educated? And where do they go and get information?
So I think if we ask the question, how important is it, we should ask how important is our money to us? And the degree to that importance will inform how important it is to be informed about it. I think most of us would answer that our money is very important. It is the key to us experiencing everything we do and living the lives that we do. And it's become really critical because of the complex external environment. And also globalization and the fact that things that happen in different parts of the world impact on our daily lives, in the price we pay for petrol and for goods and in inflation costs and those things. So it's imperative, it's become critical that we're informed. In terms of where to access the information, we live in a wonderful age of information, so that's really good. The information is available. But I think it goes beyond information. We need to be able to get information and be informed. But we also need to wade through that information, and that's where expertise comes in. So it's having someone to help us analyze the information and take what's important to us out of there.
And just navigate this financial terrain that can sometimes be very intimidating.
Absolutely. I mean, if you do a Google search or any search engine, you'll find millions of information bits on any topic you'd like, and it's impossible to wade through all of that information. So I would say when engaging with your finances, make it a part of your life to go and access the information on the various websites that are available. Old Mutual website is a great place to start, but engage with the financial advisor, someone that brings expertise to the table, and then be prepared to take action irrespective of how small those pieces of action are, but start embedding it. And action doesn't always mean buying something to solve the problem. It could mean just creating a budget, reducing your debt, and then moving, creating cash flow for emergency expense funding and so on. So it's taking the right steps towards the bigger outcome.
I do also think that people really need to start seeing the role of a financial advisor the very same way that they see the role of a doctor seeing to their health. The financial advisor sees to your wealth. And if you don't have wealth, then we're looking at wealth creation, we're looking at saving, we're looking at budgeting. I think we need to get away from, I don't have money, so I don't need to speak to anybody.
Yes, I agree. I think we've touched on it today. The complexity of the environment is immense. There are external factors and there are factors for each individual as well that are very complicated. And bringing all of that together, marrying those two worlds and coming up with a plan that's individualized and personal to me, that will help me stay accountable to my goals and the outcomes I want to achieve, to live the best life that I want to live, is key. And I think there's really good expertise out there, so we need to start building the habit of engaging with the right people and partnering with the right people to go forward.
Because only once we interact will we actually find the solutions to the problems. Only once we interact and we speak about it will we be able to know what our options are, and that we actually do have options with regard to finance, as opposed to always also seeing it in negative, positive, black and white, red and black.
Yes, absolutely. And we spoke about it earlier. I think often people are afraid to engage because they're afraid of uncovering what's going on in their financial matters. But on the other hand, they're also afraid that maybe they're expected to know things about interest rates and the financial jargon that we hear and the technical terms in our environment. And really, they don't have to. You know, you can start as, we often think that educated people, professional people understand everything. The reality is that a medical professional will understand the medical profession very well. A financial professional will understand that profession very well. So there's nothing wrong with us not knowing everything and engaging with the right people to get the information.